And we're back with the program. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We truly appreciate you being part of the broadcast here today. And I'll tell you what, in a spooky episode, it being the Halloween season, I tell you what, it had to be something that we talk about as far as a part of the Halloween culture and tradition. And who better to talk about something I really want to talk about when it comes to Halloween than my good friend, a man who I was on his show last week, and you got to check it out. It's Jason FineBurgh of the Hunnic Ween podcast. How are you, my friend?
Ooh. Well.
That was pretty scary. I like that. It's always great to have you on the show. It's truly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. First off, I want to make sure everybody checks out his program, the Hunnic Ween podcast. You want to check it out on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and also as they are a great part of the BS Podcast Network. That's Hunnic Ween, HUNNICWEEN, just like Halloween. It's awesome indeed. And I'll tell you, it's great to have you part of the show, Jason. And I'll tell you what, I want to hear your thoughts on what are the top 5 horror movie franchises, and a little bit why, in your opinion, why they are so, because as you stated on your show and also out in social media and whatnot, Halloween is your favorite time of the year.
Well, again, thanks for having me on the show. As for the hows and whys of why Halloween and how Halloween is my favorite holiday, I think it all began in the late 70s, early 80s when I would always watch the Garfield Halloween special and It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. And over the years, it was a tradition because you had Garfield and Charlie Brown for either Halloween, Thanksgiving, Easter, or Christmas. There was technically there wasn't a Garfield Easter, but they still had some sort of primetime special with Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. They would always, until they finally had their Saturday morning cartoon shows, and one sadly died and the other one continues on. So when it comes time to Halloween, I just love the atmosphere. I love the horror stories. Can't get enough of them. There's just something about the mood. There's something about the decorations. There's something about the free candy. There's something about I can watch a horror movie outside of October, but when you're watching a Halloween, there's just something about, I don't know, because it gets darker out earlier. I don't know if it's just, again, mood, atmosphere. It's really hard to tell. This year, however, I kind of forgot that we're like less than 48 hours from All Hallows Eve. And then, of course, Tuesday, it's on a weekday this year, which kind of sucks. But I don't know. This year, TV is really not into it as much. They've given us 2 Halloween specials. I know we have the Michael Jackson's Halloween, which I'm not really a fan of. I watched that last night. That was horrible. Tonight we have Dave as Pumpkins, and I'm going to have a lot of questions on that one.
And they've already run. The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. They've already run that special, and I'm not sure if they run that again tomorrow night or not as well.
Yeah, that's always personal. I can only watch that in October. And then what's even scarier is that they're already showing Christmas commercials. They have the decorations up. But as for the top 5 franchises,
what movie franchises do you think, as far as from a horror standpoint, do you think qualify as the most effective in scaring audiences?
Well, this is a hard one, but I'm actually going to go with I go with the Universal Monster Collection, but the problem is they don't scare people anymore. They're just classics. They're not. So I'm going to have to take a step above and go with the Hammer horror ones because they manage to take color and make things scarier with the gore. So that's number 5. For number 4, I have problems with this one, but I'm going to put it anyway because I like the first 4 movies of this franchise, and that's Texas Chainsaw. And that's because this was a horror movie where we dealt with aliens and we dealt with werewolves and dealt with vampires. We never really dealt with backwoods cannibals. And I love the fact you have these backwoods hillbilly cannibals that were working on they were butchers, but unfortunately their cows, I don't know, disappeared. They lost money. So they turned to cannibalism to put food on the table. And the first 4 movies are great. The 21st century ones I don't really pay too much attention to. But as silly as the second, third, and the fourth movies are, I still like the idea that these people are so insane and they're willing to kill and cut people and, sell them as meat. To me, that's genius. Number 3 has to go to Nightmare on Elm Street because I think it's scary because as you get older, you just black out. You don't want to fall asleep, but you just do.
1, 2, Freddy's coming over you.
I think the problem is he's scarier in the first movie. He became jokier by 3, 4, and 5. But with the exception of New Nightmare and that 2010 remake, it's not a bad series. Now, as for the next, I'm going to get a lot of hell for this one, and no, it's not going to be Hellraiser. I was thinking of it, but I'm actually going to go a little bit more since we lost Romero, his Creepshow, and / Tales on the Dark Side. Because Tales on the Dark Side was supposed to be Creepshow 3. It's a great anthology series. There's really nothing wrong with 2. 2 just tripped over the finish line because there were a lot of budgetary issues. But I really think you should take a look at how you should do horror films because if you just can't bring out the irony or bring out the gore, especially with that first story with Creepshow with Father's Day, the atmosphere in that one with the father coming back from the grave to get his cake, I thought was pretty. And also the Leslie Nielsen story, something that tied you over. And there were some jump scares with the crate, even though that one was too long, but still. And as for number 1, again, we lost Romero, but I have to go with the Night of the Living Dead series. At least the first one. The others are a little entertaining. I think the most underrated past Night would be Land. They're not really scary after Night, but I have to give credit where credit is due because I don't think George knew what he had when he first made those movies, and I really feel bad about the copyright issues. But it's really hard to watch any franchise because they're so concerned about the sequel, the merchandising, that as I get older, I got desensitized. So there are individual movies that I know that are a lot better than the franchises, but everything's getting franchised nowadays, and that's a problem. So
well, it's all about money, and that's God. Feedback. How about now?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Anyways, well, you got all these franchises. I think you hit it right on the head. Where all these horror movies these days want to become a franchise. Insidious and so many others. I know it's those that, like you said, you mentioned Hellraiser. I bet you that's going to get rebooted at some point in time. Also, as well, you've got Friday the 13th and also Halloween. Those franchises that were, back from a time where it really invigorated the horror movie scene and probably helped, probably laid the foundation for what we have here today. But I really just can't agree with you more. And Saw as well, especially with Jigsaw coming out in theaters. That also being a movie franchise, Final Destination, those also as well being part of the modern movie scene. Those all should be counted as those type of horror movies that should be considered within that realm, but definitely not when it comes to the classics. I definitely think you hit it right on the head with the Night of the Living Dead series and the genius that is George Romero, and they're just so sad that he's not a part of what's going on now, especially to see his work grow and transform into what many think is like The Walking Dead and the zombie genre as a whole, which many credit to him as far as really bringing it about. So definitely some great thoughts indeed. Once again, this is Jason FineBurgh of Hunnic Ween. You want to check out his truly awesome podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, and as part of the BS podcast network. I cannot let you go without your thoughts, because we had a deep, deep discussion on South Park, and you want to check out one of the latest Hunnic Ween episodes as far as what we talked about when it comes to South Park, because we really get in depth to that, along with the latest video game from the folks that helped create the South Park franchise. But when it comes to Matt and Trey and what kind of hold they have on basically our society as far as how they're able to transform modern storylines within their realm of their culture, what do you think is the best part? And well, actually, what do you think are the reasons why South Park still remains so relevant and remains such a popular part of today's pop culture?
I think it's because South Park, they keep up, and by they, Matt and Trey, keep up with current events. Somehow they're able, and this goes back to what they said about the first two seasons. They somehow had lightning in the bottle where you had these 8-year-olds just cursing and swearing. That was okay for the first two seasons, and after a while, I got sick of Cartman really quick. I mean, I bought a box of Cheesy Poofs. Like anything that could be merchandise came out. I had the Cartman plush doll, everything. But by season 2, I was saying, okay, there's only so many times they can curse, fart, burp, whatever. And I think Matt and Trey figured that out. So they were interviewed. They came off as being smart guys. Thankfully, they were able to put today's topics, and they came up with this great idea, which we saw in the documentary. They decided to do 6 days to air. And it's not that hard, because all they really do is they did the construction paper, and that's how they animated the show. And then finally, after season 2 came and went, they were able to get a bigger budget, and they were able to scan the construction paper into computers and then use that to manipulate the characters. And I think we can see now that the animation got a lot smoother, got a lot better. They're using more computer animation. They're using more relevant topics. And they do have some great senses of humor, especially when it came. They were noted for the Elian Gonzalez incident in late '99, early 2000. We all remember that one with Janet Reno. But there was also the whole Tiger Woods incident, where we don't know what happened between him and at this time his Swedish wife. So I just love the fact how there was an episode that just opened where Tiger and his wife are fighting with golf clubs, and then we cut and we see that it's Cartman and Stan there playing the new Tiger Woods game, which I thought was great. Like they really were able to put the pulse on America when they're reading what's in the paper, and they're like, we could do this now. But I think my favorite is when people were asking them in 2008, what were your thoughts on Indiana Jones, because you're Star Wars fans. And they were like, well, yeah, we're Star Wars fans, but okay, but what do you think about Indiana Jones? Because you talk about Star Wars, what about the other Lucas franchise? And they were like, well, we saw the movie, and they were saying that, we're not going to do an episode on it. Everybody was bitching about the movie. We've talked about Star Wars, which they have, and they really didn't know what they could say. And then finally, they just came up with this episode where Indiana Jones is getting raped throughout the entire thing. And they just know when to take an idea and roll with it. And within 22 minutes, what they have to say makes sense. And I think every episode that they've worked on, sometimes it's the kids just being kids, sometimes they bring in social topics, but they pretty much are not the people on YouTube that just make stupid comments and like nobody cares what you have to say when you hide behind a screen name. They're much smarter when as for Angry America, I think they really know how to talk to the people.
Well, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, I'll tell you what, they do a great job indeed on such a weekly basis with South Park. And over the years, as you and I talked about on your show, Hunnic Ween, that they've done such a great job over the years of staying relevant, of keeping their show current and fresh by tackling very controversial subjects and often not only pushing the envelope, but going over and we're creating a lot of controversy, which brings attention to their show and the great work that they do. So that's why I tell you what, they're still as fresh today in many people's eyes, and probably in our eyes as well, as what they were doing so many years ago. And I don't see them ending their great work anytime soon on Comedy Central. And we've even gone as far as, if you want to check out our conversation in greater detail, check out the great Hunnic Ween podcast, along with all of other Jason's great shows on there. Jason, tell us a little bit more about Hunnic Ween and why it's a show that you cannot afford to miss.
Well, pretty much it was Hunnic Outcasts, and it started back in 2011. And over the years, I kept rebooting the show because I really didn't know what people wanted. I podcasted because I just had a lot of pop culture swag, and I wanted to talk about it, and I tried to review it on blogs, and unfortunately, everyone has a blog. I used to do the YouTube channels, but everybody has a YouTube channel. And then I decided to do a podcast, but everybody has a podcast at this point. So I talked about Godzilla films because I didn't see many people that were doing that. And then I found out there were other people that were doing Godzilla films. So I just made it like a grab bag, like whatever came to mind I would do. And over the years, it did well. But when I looked at the numbers, a lot of people liked it when I did the Hunnic Ween episodes in October where I was talking horror. And I looked at the numbers, and they liked the horror topics, then the comic book conversations, and then the Godzilla. At the bottom, I would sometimes interview comic book artists and cosplayers. And I just figured, well, everybody's talking about comic books nowadays, and not a lot of people, if they do talk about horror films, it just seems to be like a cell phone conversation. I have a degree in psychology, a concentration in philosophy and English writing, so I figured let me just do that, just like break down the psychology and philosophy every now and then, not to do it where I'm going over people's heads. So when I rebooted the show, and I was on 3 different RS feeds. I was on SoundCloud, I was on SoundCloud, I was on Podomatic, and I was on Spreaker and Libsyn. And some were pricey. In SoundCloud, I was getting a lot of spammers. Like, everyone seemed to be a record producer that wanted the show, and you could tell like they were a Nigerian prince. So I just decided to email some people on Facebook and say, listen, what's the best place to keep a podcast where you're not going to get spam and you're going to get some good numbers, and people are actually listening, giving you feedback? So some people said Podbean, other people said Blog Talk, which is too expensive. I just kept with that. And I continued with the horror, and I started off with Ghost Story, which is this independent film from the guy who gave us Pete's Dragon, that remake a couple years ago. It wasn't bad, and people seem to have liked it. And then I just brought up the archives of stuff I talked about a couple years ago, and people liked that, which was Return of the Living Dead and the first 2 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and some other comic book ideas. When I talked about Marvel Civil War and the Super Mario Brothers movie, because a couple years ago was the 30th anniversary of the game. People like that. So I decided just to keep it with the horror theme right now, which is perfect because I have enough horror movies and comics and whatnot that in a couple weeks, Rick and Morty is also another great show that I came across. It's kind of Halloween themed because it's a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft and Doctor Who and has aliens in it. So I plan on discussing that, which will be good. So that'll be like a sub-series in the archives. But as for the South Park, well, Fractured But Whole, technically, I'm not going to give too much away because I wanted to review it, but it's still new. There is a Lovecraftian theme to it. And if you've paid attention to the Coon and Friends, you know what I'm talking about. So I kind of enjoyed that. But past all of that, the show is bi-weekly at this point. I've had guests come on. I've had co-hosts come on and off. Doors always open. But for now, I think my home will be a Podbean. I keep the show, I advertise it on Facebook, and I keep the show on Podbean, which I think is, the numbers seem to have jumped. Since August till October, I've gotten close to I'd say 7,300 downloads, which is not terrible. And a lot of people from UK, I've always gotten fans from UK, whatever RS feed I've jumped to. I don't know if it's just because that's where it goes. I don't know how it's advertised. I hashtag on Twitter a lot through BS Network. So they seem to be, they set up Twitter bots, and I hashtag the show, and I hashtag podcasting and Podgenie, and everything, hashtag anything with a podcast and Podern Family, and I give the MP3 RS feed to the show, so people seem to be downloading. I've gotten some fans, some requests, so it's been helpful. Wish I got a little more, but I feel that this is where I want to keep the series at for now, and hopefully wherever it goes. I don't really think that the horror genre is going to disappear anytime soon, and if I run out of ideas, I could always go back to the comic book ideas. But I mean, podcasting do come and go, and a lot of people can't afford to pay. It's either your career or a very expensive hobby, depending on how much you want to pay the monthly storage for the bandwidth, because there's bandwidth and there's storage. So I pay $15 to $20 a month, and that's setting up both the Twitter bots to advertise the show and for the storage and bandwidth through Podbean, which is not terrible. But a lot of podcasters can't seem to afford that. They're not getting numbers, they're not getting the listeners, and a lot of people just kind of go away, which is sad. I don't know how much longer I'll be on, because I've been doing this for 6 years now, and a lot of episodes, sadly, I lost due to viruses. Out of the 80 episodes I saved, about 25 are gone. So if anybody has ever downloaded them and can find them, I appreciate it. There were some good ones, too. But as long as I keep having listeners, at least one, I'll continue to do it.
That's awesome indeed. Once again, you got to check out the Hunnic Ween podcast. That is available on Podbean, on Stitcher, also as well available on Apple Podcasts, and of course, the BS Podcast Network. Jason, it's been great having you on. I'll tell you what, cannot wait to get you back on the show to talk more great pop culture subjects, and I truly appreciate you coming on to see us right here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.
No problem. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being part of the Pop Culture Cosmos.